All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to OneSoccer. I'm your host for today, Josh Deming. I am joined by my colleague, Alex Gangue-Ruzic, and I'm not in the best of mood. I'm assuming most of you guys aren't as well. There is a lot to talk about. I was up very late last night on X debating with fans over one very specific topic that I'm excited to get your opinion on, Alex, and honestly, everyone else in the chat. There is so many big question marks to be asked last night. Canada with a historic win in Jamaica, 2-1 to go back to BMO. Their fortress, their home form has been incredible. They scored first. They were up 3-1 on aggregate and just completely collapsed. I basically said that this is a lower moment than the Haiti collapse, in my opinion, just the way that this program was going, the players that we had, the fact that it was at home like that, and the fact that they after the first half, they had this game in the palm of their hand. There's so many different topics to touch on today. Alex and I will do our best to get them all talked about in this hour. Between subs, Biello's game management, the biggest one, as like I said, is Alphonso Davies. But Alex, I'm already getting ready and amped up to talk. So first of all, how are you doing this morning?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. It's one of those where it's always tough to sleep after a result like that, just because there's so much to dive into, the reaction, just everything you missed. Just because, especially and after an emotional game like that, there's a lot of perspective. There's a lot of just like diving back and seeing, okay, what actually went wrong? Because you're just frustrated after a result like that. But yeah, I mean, we can dive into it. Really, I don't know. I said it last night. I think I kind of stand by that. I mean, it was a disaster. Let's not kid ourselves, because for Canada to, it's all within context. For Canada, they got a terrible draw. Let's not kid ourselves. Like, if you're Canada, the fact that you got Jamaica's a good team. And I think it's important to remember it in all this, not to get swept up in the fact that, okay, this is, Jamaica's still a good team. Because I saw some of the discourse out there. You think Jamaica was some forgotten island in the Caribbean that didn't play soccer. Like, their front four will go up against anyone in CONCACAF. They're a dangerous team. I think the bigger frustration is that first three halves, Canada had them under control. They're up 3-1. Yes, they got fortunate in Jamaica that Leon Bailey just decided to miss all chances. And even early in the second half of this game, they were lucky Leon Bailey decided he didn't want to score this tie. But other than that, Canada was in control. They were playing great football in this first half in particular. But at the end of the day, Jamaica is a good team. And I think that's the most frustrating part, is that all for the months that we knew this matchup leading into it, we're like, oh, Jamaica's a dangerous team. Canada needs to be careful. Canada needs to watch out in transition. Canada can't gift any chances to their attack. And then for whatever reason, after doing a relatively good job of keeping Jamaica sort of contained across the first three halves, in the second half, it was just like they played perfectly in Jamaica's game plan and handed them a win on a plate. And I think that's frustrating, because at the end of the day, if you want to be the kings of CONCACAF, if you want to win trophies, you want to play at Copa Americas, you want to go to the World Cup, you want to do all these things that Canada said they did, it doesn't matter if you're playing France or Gibraltar or Jamaica or the Cayman Islands. When you have a 3-1 aggregate lead at home, you don't give it up, and you don't give it up in that fashion. And I think that's kind of the big mood, is that it's less that Canada lost this tie, because it could have very well happened with how good Jamaica is, but it's more how they threw away the tie.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And we're going to start there. I just put up this question here quickly, guys, because this is going to be the big topic about today. So give me your guys' rating out of 10 on Davies' performance. I've never seen such a split opinion online of, people thinking he did too much with hero ball, people thinking that, the only game plan was to go through him. He scored a goal, got an assist, he was creating. Alex and I will get into that. I just want you guys to ponder a little bit of how you rate Davies' performance, because like I said, online last night, I was getting a lot of people agreeing, because I thought he was great, in my opinion. And then I saw a lot of people saying, you're blind. There's no way you thought that was a good performance. So we'll get into it, but let's take it one step at a time. Alex, funny, after the last match, I came on here and be like, Alex, we got to sit down and talk about Canada in a positive light. We still had some negative things to say, but very positive going back home with that 2-1 lead. And I saw a comment already I brought up saying 3 of the 4 halves were solid. So let's start there. I'll bring up my takeaways from the first half. Alex, I'll go over to yours. I'll scroll through them here. Some people disagreed with Cornelius looking comfortable. I get some were saying, yeah, he didn't look that good like on the ball. He was kind of slow, and I know it's a little awkward because he's the two lefties, but I thought Cornelius in the first half was fine. He did have that really awkward little moment there at the end, and then maybe I guess the second half it went downhill a little bit, but I thought he showed he could play in the right center back. Eustachio and Kone I thought were incredible in that first half. They won the midfield battle. Canada was finding so much success. It looked like it was going to be one of those matches where Buchanan, Davies, David, and Laird were going to have some fun. Obviously, Davies got the goal. Davies, I thought, was up for it in that first half. And then I also noticed this, Alex. I wanted to get your take. Did you notice that Alistair Johnston had pretty much complete freedom to step up into midfield almost any single time he got the ball? The amount of runs I saw him make up into the midfield, I don't know if he was trying to make a midfield three at times, but that was something that caught my eye. Did anything from those takeaways that you agree with, disagree with, before I go over to yours?
Yeah, I think, well, in terms of the Johnston point, I unfortunately noticed it because the second Jamaica goal, let's just say that Johnston was in a bit of a uncompromising position when the ball was turned over, so we can dive into that. But overall, no, I thought it was a good first half. Really, there wasn't much to be nitpicky about. Other than the fact that the center backs were, again, it wasn't a bad half. It was just a bit maybe uncomfortable at times from the Canadian center backs. Everything, like, there was a lot to like, because I thought, first of all, Canada should have been up 3 or 4-0 if not for Andre Blake, and then that's another thing too, the fact that Canada let Jamaica hang around, because at a certain point it should have been 5 or 6-1. They had golden opportunities. There were some great saves, no doubt, but you got to put away one of them, pick out a corner eventually, because they just let them hang around in the game. But yeah, I thought overall the first half, Davies and Buchanan looked dangerous every time they got the ball. Laird and David had some nice link up. David kept finding Laird with some great opportunities. David was finding the pocket nice. Eustachio and Kone were just gliding through the midfield. Richie Larea looked phenomenal again, and we can talk about going forward, but man, if we're talking about players over 28 on this roster, Larea certainly looks like one who could be still starting going forward, right? Whereas some of the other ones, there's debates whether, who's even going to be making the squad going forward among the veterans. Whereas Larea, man, he's putting in a shift to start. And other really at that time at the half, there was only really 2 things. Like, okay, the center backs looked uncomfortable, fine, didn't cause any problems, and Damari Gray was starting to cause a little damage down that left side, so Alistair Johnston's side, the right. So that was a bit of a warning shot of, okay, figure out what's going on with Gray. Like, either get Johnston to mark him tighter. If Johnston's not doing it, bring on Adekugbe or something. But that was kind of the one warning I had at half, is that, okay, something could happen with Damari Gray there.
I know, and it looked like it was going our way. I know we had the lead, but Kyle Laird definitely snake bitten there. Like he said, he had glorious opportunities, and it just didn't look like it was going to fall for Jamaica. Like we mentioned, all the Bailey chances that he missed, the awkward ball towards the end that could have easily been in the back of our net right before halftime, which would have been a sucker punch. It just seemed after the half, it went our way. We were up 3-1 on aggregate. Like this thing should have been over, and let's roll over to the capitulation. And I want to start here. Dimitri is in the chat, and let me know, guys, if you noticed this yesterday. I noticed it as soon as Jimmy Brennan said it, but Dimitri says, "What's up, boys?" It all started when Boryan started doing kick-ups. It reminds me of when Herdman, poked the bear a little bit with the Croatia match, something that just, that didn't add any benefit to Canada. All it did was piss off the Croatians. This was the exact same kind of thing. Alex said that he's counted 15 seconds between when Boryan started doing kick-ups, up 3-1 on aggregate, to when Nicholson put the ball in the back of the net. I don't know. I don't know what to say. Alex, I don't know why he did it. I'm not saying that's the reason that, it went in the back of the net, because Stephen Eustachio, I thought was pretty unfortunate, because I thought that first half from Eustachio was incredible. I thought he was, like we said, him and Kone were really controlling the midfield. He's been in great form for both Porto. He had a great match in Jamaica. He's just, he's a complete package, and that's what we get. And unfortunately for him, you couldn't have scripted it out in my mind, where in the second half, 2 goals, unfortunately, it was unfortunate for Eustachio, but they're kind of on him. He got stripped of the ball. Maybe it could have been a foul, but it got in the back of the net. And then that handball, which was just, just soft. Let's just say that. It was very soft on Eustachio. So unfortunately for him, one of our best midfielders and our most important player was directly responsible for 2 of our goals. So, do you have any sympathy there for Eustachio? I know he got caught in possession, but some were saying, it could have been a foul.
Yeah, I mean, look, I guess implore you to go watch the goal, because I at first, definitely first reaction watching it, like, ooh, Stachio probably should have played it, but also watching it back, I think the second, the first goal should be up on OneSoccer there. He kind of also had no options. So I do sympathize with Eustachio there, and I mean, in terms of the Boryan, like, look, 15 seconds after he started juggling the ball was in his net. Like, in terms of irony, you can't help but pause on Eustachio when you can. Like, go back and then pause on him.
Right there, or a little further?
Yeah. So basically, what I'd look at is his main options. Derek Cornelius is taken out because Shamar Nicholson's standing right there. It'd be risky to make a pass. He can make a pass to Kamal Miller, so maybe Miller could have screamed at him to open up his hips or something like that, because the left side is open. But right now, his hips are closed. Alistair Johnson is standing there, right?
Yeah, it looks like his only option.
Press. Jamaica's press is good here. Like, it's good. Like, you look, Eustachio got his only option is Miller and Johnston, but even Gray's or Bailey's pressing Miller there on the right-hand side, number 7 in yellow. So Johnston there should stay put, just offer an option for Eustachio to play. But look what happens here is, if you continue, Johnston just drifts forward, and all of a sudden there on his second touch, Eustachio now he has no option. Like, because either he plays a very risky pass to Kamal Miller on his left foot, and his hips aren't even open up to that. He walked back towards Alistair Johnson. Naturally, Johnson should probably sag back and open up, but instead he's gone. Eustachio has to wait another second to see what's open. By then he's dispossessed. It's in the net. So it was one where it just kind of felt like Eustachio received the ball and he just had no options. He tried to be patient. Jamaica high press. Damian Lowe had the game of his life, it must be said, in the second half. I was actually really impressed with him. And yeah, I mean, it's just kind of horrifically ironic that Milan Boryan was doing keepy ups before this. But hey, people always say about soccer gods and karma, so I'm sure there's some sort of link between all that.
Yeah, I mean, do you think it was a foul right there? I mean, like I said, Eustachio is not one for making mistakes, let alone two that end up in the back of our net. I think the handball was like just completely unfortunate. Like, that just, I don't think his arms could have been in a more natural position. It's just, it is what it is. And this one, like, it was tough. Like you mentioned, he kind of ran out of options. He had to make a decision. He got stripped. Fair or not, it is what happens. What would you say to everyone here in the comments that want to take a shot at Boryan for doing something like that? Is there any excuse whatsoever to try that? I know, like, obviously the ball didn't end up in the back net because of Boryan. I don't think, like, obviously, it's not directly connected, but it doesn't help to do little keep ups and just poke the bear. And then it's just funny that you said 15 seconds later. Jimmy Brendan was livid on the broadcasting. You don't do that. There's zero reasons to do that, and I completely agree with him. So, anything can be said for what Boryan did?
Yeah, it's shocking. I think it's the best way to put it. And I think, look, you look at the second half. Again, this one's probably more tactical, more coaching. Because I think, again, as we know, Alistair Johnston, he can be very defensive first. So I think the fact that he was drifting as forward as he was on Stefan Eustachio's turnover there, right? Clear the mentality, even here. Look, pause here after the turnover. Just let it going. Kone gets the ball. He gets slightly fouled. Fine. Pause here. Who do you think is leading here? Canada's up. Why is there a 4-on-3 with? And again, we know how dangerous Jamaica's front four is. Like, yeah, whatever, you can argue the Kone foul. Is there a foul? Probably. At that point, it's moot. Why is Canada in a position where they're leading, giving up a 4-on-3 like this? Like, at that point, again, that's where something I'm like, Johnson is good at, kind of dropping back and not being so aggressive. So 100% it was tactical on both goals of him getting caught drifting forward. And I think that's the overall mentality. And that's where the Boryan goal issue is. The problem was that, look, Boryan's the captain, Boryan's the leader. It's something where naturally you do something like keepy ups in a moment where your guys are up 3-1 in a crucial game where it's still not over. And it kind of was a fitting portrait of the complacency that had seemed to settle into Canada's game in the second half. Like they felt like because they'd survived the first three halves that it was a given. They were going to cruise to Copa America. They were going to win at home, maybe score a few more goals, have a party. And it's CONCACAF. It's never that easy, especially against a team as quality as Jamaica. Okay, maybe against another team you could have gotten away with that. But again, like you're poking the bear of a team where Shamar Nicholson plays in Ligue 1. Like this isn't some guy playing, like in some no-name league. It's a good striker. He scored 3 goals across these 2 games. Guys like Leon Bailey, Damari Gray, like there's pedigree there. Bobby de Corva-Reid puts away the penalty. He's playing for Fulham. Like that's also another part that Canada was just so complacent and so like relaxed, and it was like they just forgot the scope of the game, the opponent, and that's where the Boryan keepy ups again. They weren't that egregious. I didn't even notice them at first, to be completely honest, because I more watched it back. Because I kept seeing this on people referencing Boryan keepy ups, but it's disrespectful, and it was kind of, I think, fitting of the game plan and mentality that Canada had, which was just so wrong for the game state.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of sympathy for the Canadians, just the way that, like, and we're going to get into Biello because I thought the game management is just not good enough for this level. It simply is not. I thought the subs in both matches completely baffled me. You and I have complained a lot about, the old guard, and, when something doesn't go right, well, if you play the old guard and it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. You don't get the result and you don't learn anything from the window. I'm not saying that's 100% the case this time. I'm just saying that, I think Biello felt a little out of his depths here, and it's disappointing. And when we don't have maybe a proper coach in mind, these kind of things will happen. But it's just simply frustrating, because the thing that annoyed me is just the fact that we had it in our hand. And I agree. I'm not going out saying like, oh, we lost to Jamaica. That's terrible. Because like you said, Alex, this is a good team. There's nothing wrong with losing to Jamaica, because this, like I said, this is a strong team. It's just the way that we lost and the way that we had control. And then I don't even recognize this men's national team in that second half, because it's just a completely different team that turned up. I don't know if they, like you said, clearly they were too comfortable. That's why Boryan was doing keepy ups. But like and also a little bit unlucky, I'd say, because if you look at all 3 goals, there was a clear controversy in all 3. Like the first one could have been a foul on Eustachio. I'm not saying each one is before the chat's just like, oh, Josh, don't whine. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying it's crazy that all 3 goals that ended up sending us home had a little bit of controversy. Could have been a foul on Eustachio. If it's blown, there you go. Could have been a foul on Kone. Again, blown, there you go. And then, of course, the penalty I thought was soft. I'm obviously a little biased. I'm Canadian, frustrated. But it seemed it just seemed like it wasn't really going our way there in the second half. It was just blew my mind the way that what I was watching to where we were going into that second half to what ended up happening. And it's really frustrating. And now I want to go on to the 2 biggest topics here, Alex. One is Davies, because like I said, online, my X notifications have just been nothing about Davies because I asked the question. And I'll actually bring it up. And then the second one I want to get into is Biello, because that's an easy person to pick on. Everyone in the comments have been saying, get us a new coach. We shouldn't have fired her, or not should have fired Herman, but Herman should have still been here. And we'll get into that. But I want to start with Alphonso Davies, because I asked the question last night, because our bosses said, all right, Josh, be careful with what you want to say. Sleep on what you want to say. Bring something to the conversation if you're gonna say something. So I tried to say something that I thought would get the conversation going. So I basically just said, how do you rate Davies' performance? Because I thought he was solid. He had his goal. Lucky or not, he had his goal. He had an assist. He was causing problems. And the thing for me is that, and I think this comes from, again, Biello and game management, but also some of the players. At the end of the match, nobody wanted the responsibility to put in that ball, to make that run, to create something. There was times where the ball was on the right-hand side, and they just said, all right, come on, get it back, find Davies. It was so easy to defend because they knew exactly what was going to happen. Not everything has to go through Davies. We all know that. But to me, it didn't look like anybody else. Like Hoylett had 3, 4, 5 opportunities I saw to put the ball in the box. And it's like he didn't want it. And he's one of the vets. So I can't blame Davies because everything doesn't come off. Like no one else wanted the responsibility. They cycled the ball over to Davies to create something out of nothing, which isn't always the case. So like I said, there's plenty of comments in here saying, I agree. And then some are saying, he's trying hero ball too much. This is on him. How many times did he lose possession? So I don't know. There's an okay point for both, but we had a big question mark on Davies after the last match and where he fits in this team. And I thought he had a really good bounce back performance. So in the chat, guys, give me a rating out of 10 on Davies. I want to see what you guys are thinking. And Alex, give me your thoughts. Do you agree with me, or do you have something else to say?
Look, I think Alphonso Davies had one of his better games in a Canadian shirt. And I think it's a real shame that the game went the way it was, because if Canada, again, and I'm of the opinion, and we can dive into it more in depth, that Canada completely mismanaged the game tactically with the substitutions, with the personnel. Like, it was egregious. Like,
we'll get into that. That's our next point.
We will dive into that. So I think if Canada hadn't mismanaged the game the way they had, that was one of Davies' best games in a Canadian shirt. And of course, he had a goal and assist, so that will always help. But even beyond that, yeah, he was holding on to the ball a bit long, as he does sometimes, but he was doing it in the right way. I've always said with Davies, I say with anyone who attracts double or triple teams, it's a weapon. Again, we're not going to compare Davies to Messi, but to an example, watch a lot of Lionel Messi with Argentina, for example. Watch him at the World Cup. The fascinating thing about Messi is the ball just sticks to him, right? But what he does so well is, A, know when to play 1-2 touch, but then also know when to just hold on the ball, 4 people or go around him because he's Messi. And then he plays that pass out, and everyone's like, oh, there's a guy wide open. Who would have thought, for quadruple marking Lionel Messi? And there were a few moments yesterday in the game. In the first leg, for example, Davies would hold on the ball. Jamaica would pounce. They would tackle him. The difference I noticed in this game is that when Davies would hold on the ball, 2 or 3 guys would come in. He would play that line-breaking pass. He would find Jonathan David in the middle, especially in the first half. He could have had more than just the goal by the first half. He could have had, an assist or 2. And he was just showing a good overall management of knowing when to draw in defenders. But then also, there was a few times where he's playing 1 or 2 touches. Genuinely, I actually had noted down a bunch of clips, and maybe, once this window dies down, I'll kind of get back to it and clip it, because I still think it's an important example of how Davies should be playing in a Canadian shirt. He had some great moments of 1-2 touch play that I noted down and was ready to clip. Of course, with how the game went, I ended up having to pivot in terms of just having to get a story out and everything. But no, I thought this was a good performance from Davies, and in the end, it was really it's a shame that it was wasted by just the overall game management, and how aggressive Canada was in the second half, and how they kind of threw it all the way. And yeah, again, just to the point with the substitutions, you look at who's out there in the second half when Canada's chasing a goal, other than Davies, who naturally everyone just passes it to him and are probably like, do something. Other than him, Liam Miller, credit to Liam Miller, because he tried something. He put out a dime of an assist on Jonathan David's head. He cut in and shot. At least he was trying to get the ball on target. And then also Junior Hoylett, I thought he was also delivering some good balls into the box. No one seemed to want the responsibility anyways of putting in the killer ball, killer pass. I also don't think it helps that you look over at the bench. Stefan Eustáquio is probably someone you want on the pitch. Ismail Kone is someone you probably want on the pitch.
Yeah.
Sam Adekugbe also has a decent delivery. Maybe you want him on the pitch. Ali Ahmed, he's going to run at guys. Maybe you want him on the pitch. But yeah, I think overall this Davies performance it's unfortunate it gets forgotten, because I think he did his job.
But I love after a match to like one of my favorite things to do is put out like takeaways and get what people think. And I love when people disagree, because again, I'm not saying I'm always right. There's different points of view. And I think the way that Tim kind of summed it up is the reason that I think this tweet I put out had so much different feedback from the way that each individual kind of perceived the match. Because like you said, Alex, the first half, totally opposite from the second half, from the performance and even Davies' performance individually. And Tim said, 8.5 when they had to control the game, which I would basically say that was up until Boryan started juggling the ball, until that first goal went in. And like I said, every time I saw Davies at his best is when he's running. And because Jamaica lined up in that 4-4-2, there was just so much space to attack. They knew that they needed to score. It's why the midfield success was having success with Kone and Eustáquio, and we saw Buchanan, Davies looking dangerous. It just seemed like this was a match for Alphonso Davies. And if, Kyle Larin maybe puts away one of those opportunities in the first half, could have been a little different. It's not Larin's fault. It is what it is. A couple of really good saves. But then in the second half, where people perceive what Davies did, because he had the ball so much at the end when we were kind of trailing and everything, wasn't going off, because it was the same script. It was cycle the ball to Davies. He does his little shimmy, then he moves over to the left and he tries to whip in a ball. And that was pretty much it. It was relatively easy for Jamaica to basically defend. But that was just my point, was like no one else. I get what they're saying. Like they said that he was so bad because the deliveries weren't there and he kept losing possession. It's like, from me, whether it was Biello's instructions or the players on the pitch not having, the cojones to do it themselves. I'm not looking at Davies because he tried. No one else looked like they wanted it. And they put it to their star bar. I didn't love that Davies tried the same thing over and over and over again. But that's just it just kind of seemed like a lack of creativity towards the end there. And I think that's why a lot of different people said, you know what, Josh, I disagree. I thought Davies had a horrible game. And it's just funny the way that, people perceive a certain match. But those were my kind of takeaways. Just the second half was a capitulation. It reminded me of that Haiti match. Eustachio, I thought, was very unfortunate. I said Davies was great, and that was the big, no, he wasn't. How was the first comment here? How was Davies great? What game are we watching? And I just kind of said, he had a goal and assist, causing problems. He lost the ball at time, but no one else really wanted to. No one was providing him those overlaps. There was not a lot of movement in the box. It was just kind of get it to the byline, try to get it into the box for no one really. And yeah, but it's time to move on to the real one. And I had a lot of people say, this should be the first takeaway. And these aren't ordered, but I agree. So serious questions should be asked about Biello's game management, Alex. And I'm just going to bring up the match itself, and we're going to go through a couple things. So we'll just simply with the starting 11. This is exactly the starting 11 you and I picked, Alex, for one of the first times. You and I on the last stream put it together. If you're on stream, it's not actually lined up this way, but it was a 4-4-2. It was Boryan, Johnston, Cornelius, Miller, Larea. Right mid was Buchanan, center mid Eustachio, Kone, left mid Davies, and Laren and David were the two strikers. I didn't have a lot of issues with the game itself, like the lineup. It's just the subs is what really threw me off, the way that Biello went about it. And I want to start with Liam Miller because, like you said, when I talked about people wanting the responsibility to do something, Liam Miller is such a direct, straightforward type of player. He will always run. He will always try to shoot. He will make that pass. It's what the fans at Preston was why they love him. And it's something that, that energy could have helped. And when you look at someone like Jonathan Osorio, and I don't want to pick on him, but he's had a really poor season with TFC, and he's brought absolutely nothing to the national team in the first match against Jamaica and now in this one. So I guess, Alex, what do you think Biello's thought process was behind Kay, Hoylett, and Osorio? And more specifically, look at who he took off. Kone, Laren, and Buchanan. And then all of a sudden, a goal goes in, and it's like he forgot what the scoreline was. So I guess try to help me in the chat understand why he made these moves.
Yeah, really, these subs, there's so much to unpack with them that I just felt was wrong. First of all, for me, really, it starts all the way back in minute 50 because Jamaica at halftime, they're down 2 goals in the tie. They need to change something. Jamaica was getting run over, especially like in transition in midfield. Canada was running over them. What did Jamaica do? They made a sub at halftime and they put Damian Lowe into central defensive midfield. And credit to Damian Lowe, and maybe he should consider seriously taking up this position full time. But he was a machine. He was a tank. And I think around sometime at minute 50, I was watching the game. I'm like, that was a good adjustment by Jamaica. I think like you could feel that the tide was shifting. And I think naturally I'm like, okay, minute 50, Jamaica's already taking over the game. Canada should probably make a change. Okay, minute 55, it was still like going back and forth. There had just been the Boryan injury layoff. There had been Eustachio got crunched by that one tackle in midfield. I'm still thinking, okay, Canada should still probably make a sub here. Like these injuries are just buying them time. They should probably make a sub. Minute 60. All right, you should definitely make a sub. Most coaches make a sub by minute 60, right? All right, minute 62, you concede. Okay, if there hasn't been a sub already, where is this sub? All right, you still have a 1-goal lead. Let's get something in, shore up the midfield, put a third body in midfield or something, because you're getting run over right now. All of a sudden, 66, you give up another goal. And then by the time they actually made the sub in minute 74, the game was 3-3. So first of all, for me, it was the decision not to make any subs till minute 74, when in my opinion, I think with how Jamaica had completely changed the game at halftime, they should have been considering subs as early as 50. Honestly, I think that was the big thing that's 24 minutes. And then by then the game would have gone from 3-1 on aggregate to 3-3. And then, yeah, the decisions at 3-3, it's a different game. Of course, It's a tie game, but then there's away goals. And clearly Jamaica had taken over the game at that point. Why does Canada go like for like, right? Because clearly Jamaica had figured out the midfield. What's bringing off Kone going to do? Because Kone was at least shuttling the ball forward, had just scored, or actually, yeah, he gets subbed off right when he had scored his goal as well, right? At that point, it was 4-3. So Kone looked like he was making things going forward. And then you bring off Buchanan as well, which was at least he was dangerous down that right side. And then Laren, a body that you might need a goal, especially with the away goals. Why would you take off? It's one of those where you wondered what he could have done if he was on. And even then, it wasn't so much who was taken off. Replace them like for like with Osorio, who has been struggling all second half of the season for former Toronto. Junior Hoyt, I thought that was a good sub. And again, I thought he was making things happen. So I'm not going to throw that one out. Marc-Anthony Kaye, again, not to be harsh on Marc-Anthony Kaye, but he has been dropped for 6 months. He hasn't been in the fold. He's coming off a red card for New England, especially in a game like this where if you need to lock things up, is Samuel Piette not there on the bench as a true number 6 if you really want to short things up and calm the game down? Or, you maybe want a bit more shuttling, you want a bit more ball playing ability. You have Ali Ahmed, good form. And I think that was also the second issue. Okay, the time of the subs, throw that out. The fact that you look at down the bench and of the 3 of the 5 guys you brought on, Osorio, Kaye, Russell Rowe, Osorio is struggling for club form. Kaye just hasn't been in the national team. And Russell Rowe, I thought he was fine. He's not going to do, as a number 9, he didn't get much service at the end. This is someone who has 63 minutes for the national team all year. And you're like, all right, or in his career, sorry, it's all right, must-win game, you need a goal, get in there, go score a goal. And it's like, could there not been either a more informed option? Because I say Russell Rowe, at least if he'd been informed for club, and he has been in decent form. He only has, I think, 600 first-team minutes this year. That's where you're wondering someone like Ike Ugbo, what's he up to these days? Charles Andreas Brim, could they have at least come in, are in form and are familiar with the national team setup? So for me, it was two-pronged. It was the timing of the subs and then the subs themselves, the fact that you leave guys like Piette, Ahmed, some other guys at a Kugby who could have shored up the game and brought something different.
Yeah, I mean, well summed up. Definitely know you're pondering on that, Alex. But yeah, I mean, to not repeat what you said, I'll just kind of like simplify it as well. As like when I looked at the game, like when someone like Buchanan comes off, for me, it's Liam Miller. Liam Miller's show went on, and like you said, I'm not going to talk about the timings. I agree, it could have been at different moments, but I think someone like Liam Miller would have been a really good player to replace Buchanan with the energy, the speed, the directness. Maybe just simply not bringing off Kyle Larin. I mean, it's hard with his match fitness, but I mean, I think Junior Hoylett could have been a good option to go up front with David as just like, and then obviously Kone in the middle. You look at the bench, I think Biello's ability to not give certain players an opportunity can hurt him. And I mean, I'm not going to get into it because I think you covered it really well, but yeah, the game management there was shocking. And it, I think the biggest question that a lot of people have is what happens now? So if you guys don't know, soccer, where is it? Yeah, Canada Soccer tweeted this out. It was relatively known last night, but the Copa America play-in round is Canada against Trinidad. It goes off of the FIFA rankings, so the 4 losers of the quarterfinal drop into the play-in round. Canada was the highest ranked team, so they play the lowest ranked team, which is Trinidad and Tobago, and then I believe it's Honduras, and I think they were second, maybe Costa Rica would be. Costa Rica against Honduras for the other play-in, and 2 will head to the Copa America. So Alex, I honestly really didn't think it would come to this, because I truly believe that we were going to win. I mean, I thought after the first leg, that would kind of give me an idea of what I would expect. But considering we won that match going back to BMO, in my wildest dreams, I didn't think I saw what I did last night. And it's super, super disappointing. And yeah, we're getting made fun of a little bit online. We're getting made fun of a little bit in the chat here from a couple of happy Jamaicans, but it's a one-off. It's in Frisco, Texas. It's Canada, Trinidad. At the end of the day, this is a game that they absolutely should win. So, Alex, I'm going to ask you a very controversial question. You don't have to answer if you don't want to. Will Biello be in charge for that match? Nah, no, I put you on the spot there.
Yeah, I mean, what do I think he's in charge?
Do you think, yeah, like I want you to tell me, do you think he will still be in charge for this match?
I think it wouldn't be surprising if he still is, because, I think it's something where Canada's had time to make a managerial hire, of course they want to make the right hire. They don't want to rush things. But yeah, I think it's something where they've said they wanted to get the general secretary in and then hire a coach. Look, I think based on what we've seen from Mauro Biello, I don't think he's really exactly passed his audition with flying colors, to say the least. But this is again based on more what we know about Canada and how they operate. I find it hard to believe that within less than 4 months they'll have a new coach and new everything, because that's a fast turnaround. And from what we've seen, the fact that there hasn't even been any movement or anything yet. If you're going to ask me to say, I'd say he's still in charge. We can debate whether or not that's the right decision, but that's just how I feel it would be in March. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I think you handled that very well, Alex. I'm going to throw him on the spot. You don't have to answer. I agree. It's difficult because I think Canada Soccer were really hoping that they would have won this. Obviously, like that's a stupid thing to say, but they were really hoping because it would almost bought them a little bit more time. They would have got through Jamaica. It was a really tough qualifying quarterfinal. We qualified for Copa America. That is done, stress-free, and we get an opportunity to win some silverware. Best case scenario, and then after that first leg result, they were probably sitting there laughing. But then to do it the way that they did and go back on home turf where they have been so good for so long and lose the way that they did, and in my opinion, you look at game management, and that is the number one reason why I think that this collapse happened. I'm not taking all the blame away from the players themselves. They're the guys on the pitch, but I think, like we just went through for 20 minutes, that there's a lot of things that could have been done differently. I wonder if that maybe puts a little pressure on them, because this, like I said, this is a one-off game. If you get someone in now, because this game's in March, you do have some time. Now there's not a lot of windows, obviously. So maybe that's there's no windows, right? There's no international windows between now and March, or
there's no official windows.
Official windows.
One thing Biello did say in his post-game press conference is that if he's still around, he said that having a January camp is a priority just to get some guys in rhythm and together. But of course, I guess imagine if there is a new manager, you want that anyways to get a look at some of those MLS guys. But look, I mean, really to in terms of Biello specifically, to hone in, I think Biello with this audition, he has a chance. He had to do one of two things. Either he comes in, he shows that he can freshen up the squad, make those hard changes that maybe hadn't been made over the last year because of loyalty, brotherhood, all those things, and show that, okay, he can be that guy to refresh Canada, or show that, okay, he can lean on some of these guys who are familiar, like he tried to do, show that, okay, there's still some juice in that lemon. You can squeeze them. It just happened that maybe Herdman, the message had maybe gone stale for some of these guys, that Biello could come in, squeeze that lemon, so to speak, get out of the guys he was comfortable with now, and then start to transition forward. Ultimately, you look back, I mean, it's just 3 games, but it's hard to say he's done either, because first off, in terms of auditions, pretty much everyone who's seen the field in the 3 games under Biello is pretty much were regulars before, right? We hadn't seen a minute of Ali Ahmed. We haven't seen a minute of Luc de Fougerolles. You saw Mathieu Chouanière in the last camp. So, okay, there's the one new face, Harry Payton as well. But other than those two, especially in these 2 games, right, it was all players that were familiar, like especially the subs in both games. It's the likes of Kay, Osorio, Hoylett, right? So he went lean for the veterans. And then as we saw, and we've been saying this for a while now, with the current group that Canada has, it feels like they've hit a ceiling. I don't think that's unfair to say. Like, you look at, right, like they hit their ceiling at the World Cup. It's clear that they struggle to beat top teams outside of CONCACAF. And now I think the biggest worry is that they're starting to lose games in CONCACAF. That's where you're like, okay, not only did they hit a ceiling, they're stagnating. Teams are passing them. Teams are lapping them. And Biello showed that he wasn't able to squeeze that lemon more than it already has been squeezed. So I think personally he had to do one of 2 things. I don't think he did. And I think because of that, that's where, again, Canada should continue to look at a new coach, one that can come in and freshen this things up. Because I think that's the biggest takeaway from all this. It's not that, because for Canada, it's not like you're looking at this squad and be like, this team can't compete in CONCACAF. This team doesn't have a core that can at least be dangerous in 2026. I think there's still a core there, right? Whether We can agree if these players are flawed or not, but I think you look at Davies, Buchanan, David, Eustachio, Kone, Johnston, Larea. That's a decent core. And then there's young guys who are on the cusp of joining them, right? Ahmed, DeFougerol, it's all the young keepers that we haven't seen, Sirois, Sinclair, etc. Then there's also some vets who can still do a job, Larea, Adekugbi, Crepeau, etc. But what's clear now is that there's they're caught in a transition moment right now where they haven't quite transitioned to some of those guys to help support the main group, and now they're kind of left in this situation where they've just been slowly stagnating, and they're not doing anything to fix the problem at hand.
I agree, and you and I, because it's interesting because I like seeing what again certain people have different points on, and you and I were very firm about giving turning a new leaf, bringing some players in, some young players, and not even just bringing in new faces. I think a lot of these other players that you and I want to see with this national team deserve to be there on the basis of what they're doing with their club. I don't think it's like we're calling in just random people for nothing. Like there's reasons why certain Canadians, I think it's time to integrate them in, looking ahead at 2024 Copa America and the 2026 World Cup. And one of the bigger issues is they just weren't willing to do that. And I thought it was interesting watching like Platt and Wheeler talking about it, because they kind of disagreed with us a little bit. And I get their point too. There's not a huge opportunity to get in new faces, and Biello knows this group, he trusts this group. And when you mentioned getting, squeezing the lemon, Alex, it's like if John Herdman was squeezing the lemon, you're grabbing, the shadow of John Herdman, like it's his assistant. I don't know what new ideas he was really going to bring, and he didn't have the opportunity to really show it. And I think that's the reason, circling back to the question, is that Biello will be here is the lack of other windows coming up, the lack of resources. And, at the end of the day, they're against Trinidad and Tobago, and they should get the job done. So I don't know, man. I think that Biello will be there. I'm excited to see maybe one day who's going to come in, and hopefully we'll be able to get this game to another level. But I saw someone put in the comment that Thomas Christensen from Panama could be a good option. And I think that could be an excellent shout. I don't know if Canada could ever get him or afford him, but that's a coach that's doing wonders right now with Panama. You saw the 2 dominant performances over Costa Rica, and he's familiar with CONCACAF, which I like. But we have a comment here from Mr. Adam Jenkins. But at some point, if the big goal of 2026 is time to focus on 2026, players, staff, plans, changing of the guard. Alex, I feel like you and I have beaten that to death. Like I fully agree with Adam. I fully agree with you. Like if it was up to us, man, I would bring in a coach now. If it's up to me, as long as they're doing their due diligence, which I don't know if they've even started, but hopefully the process has begun to find a new manager with the right ideas that wants to come in, that's energized, and whatever the resume will look like, and take over this group so they have a clear leadership going forward. A lot of behind the scene changes need to happen too, and players. And I don't want to be the guy to say it, but Milan Boryan, I don't need to see him in this team anymore. I know he's your captain, but he's not good enough at this level to continue on to 2024 Copa America and the 2026 World Cup. And it's tough because you look back at this window, he's the one who was juggling. He had a couple. I'm not saying that the goals were directly related to him, but I mean, Shamar Nicholson's first one was a bullet, but it was relatively close to him. And it's time to move on. Jonathan Osorio keeps coming off the bench for absolutely no reason. There's different players that should be given an opportunity. And then Biello comes up with excuses of why Matthew Chouanier isn't here. But Samuel Piet is on the same team. And I'm at a loss of words of trying to, be like, yeah, this is smart. We have players like Ike Ugbo, Corbiano, who was on good form. I know he's injured right now, but he was on good form. Like there's other players spread across that are just so far gone out of Biello's sight that it's just time. And I'll beat it to death. And Alex, I know that you and I agree on a lot of it, but I don't know, anything you want to take a look at here? Because you and I have been shouting basically since the World Cup to now it's time to, that was their last dance. And clearly it's not. And if Biello is still in there, I think these guys will be around until a new manager comes in.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% with Adam. That's why I pinned the comment up, because I wanted to talk about it. But yeah, I just think it's right now, genuinely, it's exactly 364 days since Canada played Belgium at the World Cup. So it's been a year since their magic adventure. And look, the World Cup again, we'll say it again and again. I have no problems with how that was handled. It was such a big deal for Canada to battle and get to the World Cup the way that they did. and it was important to bring some veterans along just to kind of be like, all right, you've got, like it's a special moment, and they worked so hard to get it there, and it made sense. But Canada also has a unique opportunity where they've already qualified for the 2026 World Cup. So what that means is, like, if you think about it, you have a free grounds for experimentation, for finding that next level over 4 years, right? Like, yeah, you're playing some must-win competitions like Nations League, Gold Cup, maybe even Copa America along the way. But at the end of the day, you're not sitting there life or death in 2025 knowing that you have to play away in Honduras and you have to win to go to a World Cup. Like, and all that to say is that gives you chance to experiment. And I find it frustrating that a year on, all that we know about the new guys is that Dane Sinclair looks solid for 2 games in the Gold Cup. Ali Ahmed looks like he could be a potential long-term starter. Moise Bombito looks like a solution at the center back. Other than that, we don't really know a whole lot in terms of this team. And again, from the issue is, I get it from a coaching perspective why you play Milan Boryan. At the end of it, he's not a terrible keeper. Like, he's not, like, I'm not going to say he's sitting here and he's, Sunday league level, because that would be unfair to Boryan. But we know what he is at this point. And I will say it again, I'll continue to beat the drum, because for me, Borjan's emblematic. He's an old school keeper. He likes to be on his line. He struggles to play with the ball at his feet, right? Canada, if they want to be a modern, fluid team, that starts with a goalkeeper who can play with the ball at his feet. So again, as long as Milan Borjan's in the goal, and I've been saying this for a while now, so this isn't anything new, Canada in strict is always going to be stuck in this current style as long as Borjan's in the goal. So that's already option one. So I think, again, the big thing is now for 2026, it's not so much that, okay, Boryan and all these guys are bad, but Sirois could be better than Boryan, especially in 2026. You look at the back, Steven Vittoria, still a good center back, but Moise Bombito could be better in 2026. Luke de Fougerolles could be better in 2026. Ali Ahmed could be better in 2026. How are we going to know? You put him out in the field and play. You're also going to know by letting them learn, by letting them get the chance to build chemistry. And plus, at the end of the day, if you're playing a style that restricts players like Davies, restricts players like Eustachio, Kone, you're not helping yourself. And I think guys like de Fougerolles, for example, who are a ball-playing modern center back, even if he makes a boatload of mistakes to start, at least you'd be working towards the style you want to play that will get the most out of your guys, versus now where it's just, not only are you stuck with this older guard, but then they're also not conducive to the way they're playing. So it's a full circle for me, safe to say.
It is a full circle. And like we said, if the focus is 2026, and the man who put up this comment is going to come in with us right now, but it's a really good point, because, if you're not willing, and Alex, you and I have just talked about this so many times and what we want to see. And it's just, if you're not willing to make these changes, it's like, when are you going to make these changes? How many more windows, how many more opportunities are these guys going to get and continue to drop the ball until there's actual change? So let's ask him about it, because he had 2 very good comments here. I'm excited to have him on. Wonder if he's going to be as angry and frustrated as we are. Mr. Adam Jenkins, how are you doing this morning, my man? Angry.
I woke up in a great mood. What are you talking about?
You did.
It's a beautiful day. It's been raining for 3 straight days in Toronto. I have not dried off from last night yet. I'm in a great mood.
Good.
Good. You
too, boys.
It is good. But Adam, I mean, rainy day kind of sums up how I'm feeling, at least. But you had a good comment here, and like I said, I've seen different points of views of why would you bother making changes while you don't have maybe your manager in. Biello knows these certain amount of guys, but it's just like, the more windows that keep happening without change, when are this opportunity going to come to actually give some new players an opportunity? So you put the comment up, if the goal is 2026, when is the changing of the guard going to happen? And what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I'm of a few minds like everyone, and I do my best in these situations to speak as little as possible and try and listen as much as I can, because I'm surrounded by so many different points of view, whether it's standing on the exhibition Go Train platform and silly wearing my OneSoccer jacket and being like, Jenkins! And I'm like, oh, I don't want to talk about the game right now, but let's talk about the game right now. And Carm and Jimmy and Jordan and everybody and Ollie, Gareth, you guys, everyone brings that point of view, and I think it's important. So I truly, as much as I can, just try and listen, and every now and then I'll give my opinion when I'm asked for it. I'm nauseous at the thought, but there's a piece of this that almost reminds me of what TFC did, where they're like, here's John Herdman. John Herdman's going to sit in the shadows and wait until the last game of the season and just observe and plan. While it was bizarre and it was frustrating, maybe you almost need that. But what TFC didn't do properly, and I hope that Canada Soccer learns from, again, all my opinion, is they need to say, okay, step one, General Secretary. Jason DeVos and Charmaine Crooks come in, President, General Secretary. I don't think that was ever the long-term plan with that tandem. So until there is that stable leadership at the top, I think Charmaine Crooks wants the job. I think Charmaine Crooks can do the job as president. It's kind of like a president in the American sense, or a governor general in Canada, where they are sort of the figurative head of state. They are in charge. They obviously have a lot of responsibilities, a lot of power, but the general secretary is the CEO of the business. The general secretary will come in, he or she, with a plan, and this is the plan. And from there, it needs to be acted upon. The issue that I've been having with all of this is because this process is taking so long, there isn't really an option to be as experimental as you'd like. And I think last night was a wake-up call. Jamaica deserved to win that game based on how they played in those minutes. You guys rightfully said Jamaica is a very good team. I think if you came into this game thinking Canada should steamroll Jamaica, the Reggae boys were smirking. I'm trying to not use too many industry terms here, but I was responsible for the CONCACAF arrival interviews yesterday. That was one of my jobs on the touchline. And when I asked Heimer about playing in front of some Jamaican supporters at BMO and how the team might be able to look up into the stands for the flags and use that as motivation, he straight up said Canada has been cocky, or I think he said arrogant. Canada's been kind of arrogant on social media. And at first I was like, did I miss something? And then I go, no, that's just kind of the vibe that they've been projecting since they qualified for Qatar first in CONCACAF. Hell of an accomplishment. I said then, and I wasn't the only one to say it, that was ahead of schedule. And the problem is when you're ahead of schedule, the expectations go from here to here. And they got there really, really fast. Now, it's good to be passionate and demand excellence, but I think somewhere along the way, and part of it was the messaging and brotherhood and swords and all these things, but the expectations are there. I don't know that Canada was ready to meet those expectations. And that's part of the problem. They were trying to grow. And now we're in this weird stage where you have players that I think many supporters, many pundits don't think should be with the current group. But the reality is no one has come in to earn and kick them out. However, if you do not give the next generation and that group you think will be key in 2026 reps, what are you doing? I think there's a handful of people who played last night, like actually played minutes, that should not be there. If you want to keep them for the match to try and get into Copa, fine. But then all of a sudden you're saying, well, then if Canada qualifies for Copa America, are those the players that are going to play Copa America? And I think the answer is they probably shouldn't be. So that was why I was wondering prior to Japan, and I know there's FIFA ranking points and you want to put on a show, start experimenting, start exposing some of these players to a higher environment and get them ready. Because if you keep kicking that can down the road, like when are you ever going to start to build? That's the thing that I'm struggling with the most right now.
So Adam,
end of rant. I dropped my mic, but it's on a swivel, so I'll just do this instead.
No, you're right. Like, you're right a line of what Alex and I have been preaching for a while. And like you said, and maybe because you're just smarter than a lot, you like to sit back. You like to sit back and listen. Because like I've seen Wheeler and I've seen Ollie talk about that, why would Biello make these kind of changes? Because he's new to the job. You had 4 matches you could have played in September, October. You got 1. So he's going maybe with the players that, he knows. And my counterpoint to that is, well, if I was Biello personally, like if I was Biello and I really wanted this job, I would try to put my own stamp on it. There's a lot of different reasons as to why, like, you can still trust your core players, but you have to have the ability to take a look at what some of these Canadians are doing, either in Major League Soccer or over in Europe, and give a few a chance. And some of the new faces he brought in kind of baffled me. I mean, it was cool seeing Chouanier, but at the end of the day, we didn't learn too much. We go into this match, and I agree with everything you're saying. From the very top, it needs to have a decision made, and then it needs to work its way down. Because like you said, I feel like if they would have qualified yesterday, then I could guarantee you're going to see Vittorio Boryan, like these old guard, Osorio at the Copa America. You might have even seen Biello take this team to the Copa America. There's still a good chance he might. So I guess from what you said, and Alex and Adam, you guys can jump in, when now? So you keep saying kicking the can down the road, but when is it going to end? When do you think you actually can look at some fans out there that are wondering this question and be like, this is going to happen. This is going to finally change. Do you think that there's any chance that'll happen in 2024 or no?
I'll go quick, and I want to highlight. I don't think I have power to click, and maybe Armin could bring up the comment from Scott Wilson. I think I've used this quote in my own brain several times, or maybe I can click. Sorry. Isn't the definition of insanity doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result? Yes, yes. I've been thinking about that a lot, and the only thing that I hate to be the pump the brakes guy, because everyone wants the Stephen A. Smith takey fire all the time. We don't know what Mauro Biello's freedom is with this team. We don't they could have brought him in and said, Mauro, we're going to give you the interim tag because the John Herdman thing kind of surprised us, though. Probably shouldn't have New Zealand, remember, everybody. But you're going to give you these windows, or these are your dates. Don't rock the boat. It is entirely possible that was set. Now, I don't know that. I'm literally just speaking. It's entirely possible. There is a world that exists where he was not allowed to be given the reign. The other thing that I noticed, and one of the reasons I love being pitch side, is you just observe a lot. I know that they brought in new faces and there's some legends in there, and Stephen Caldwell and Paul Stelter. I don't have a bad thing to say about either of them. But everyone's doing their job coaching up, but it just seemed like in that panic of after the goals, they had brought Oso on. He was going to come in and replace Kyle Larin. I can't remember which goal it was because it all blended in so fast. The goal was scored, and they pulled Oso back and they said, "You're not yet." But like literally minutes before, they're like, Stelteri went to him and said, "Get in the box, attack." They wanted to go for that second goal. Then all of a sudden they score and things change. So then Oso leaves, Mark Anthony Kaye's coming up, and then the next goal happens. Then Oso's back in junior highlights. Like there was this thing of panic, and I don't know the nuts and bolts. These guys have their coaching badges and the experiences that I don't. I'm never going to try and out coach coaches. But what it felt like from my perspective was I always wonder if coaches game plan. So they sit in a room and say, here's plan A. Plan A is we are leading XYZ, but plan B is if they score, or plan C is if we score again. Like generally, I'd like to think, speaking with coaches and managers, that there are tactics and ideas. They do game simulation. It didn't feel like that happened. Or if it did, there was panic and they went away from the plan. So that was one of the other takeaways I had from last night. I just don't know if Mauro is going to be the guy, and it's entirely possible that he is still the gaffer in March for that match. Like, will he be allowed to experiment? Will he be allowed to not bring people in? He mentioned wanting to do the camp like you guys had spoken of earlier. If he gets that chance, is that when you're going to try the young players in and out? And I think Bev Priestman gets some criticism sometimes, and I think she deserves it a lot of the time, as any coach does when things don't go well. She has done a better job, I think, with the women's national team than the men's national team have done with bringing in players for taste, but then when they perform, let them ride. Like Jade Rose became a star. They could have very easily said, okay, here's your cup of coffee. You played well, but you're not ready yet. No, she played well. She's in form with this team. Play her. Like it to me, it's as simple as that. But if the men's national team isn't going to try that, and there is no perfect time to try that, you can do that in a camp environment. That's when I go back to, when is it going to happen? Sorry, Alex. Please go.
Because there's always an excuse. Like you said, we had 1 out of 4 available friendlies. Don't rock the boat. Now we have to qualify for Copa America. Let's not rock the boat. The next excuse, we have a one-off match. We can't bring in a new coach like when there's no actual recognized windows up until it. Don't rock. Like I get what you're saying, Adam, and they're just going to keep kicking it down the line. And Alex and I talked about Biello's decisions as well, as we just touched on the subs. And I mean, there was no true game plan whatsoever as well towards that end of the match. I put a very controversial tweet out, which I didn't think it was that controversial, saying Davies was great. People did not like that. They thought the amount he lost the ball towards the end. But it's like, what identity did you have out there? No one.
Yeah, and that's definitely supporters culture, and like everyone's entitled to watch that. And certain people have different takes. They've been drinking to stay warm all night. That's another factor that I always remind myself, that the viewers are not always sober. Or the viewers just watch things differently than we do, and that their perspective is always valid.
Yep.
Again, Alex, I'm gonna give it to you in a minute here, but I almost wonder for the supporters, if the new general secretary came in and said, this is my plan, we're going to have some short-term pain. And they just straight up said it. We're going to change the guard. There's going to be a brand new young wing that comes in, and they're going to grow and they're going to make a ton of mistakes. But 2026 is the goal. We have 2 years to get ready. Would the supporters be like, I am willing to accept that because I feel like there's a plan? That's what I always wonder, because it's sports. It's win now all the time, and it's important to be competitive. They just lost their trophy. They just lost their chance at a trophy for Nations League. You get into Copa America, crazy things can happen. You're not winning Copa America. So like the silverware is really not attainable. That was what 2023 was. Go get a trophy. We know how that went. So if somebody were to come in and say, this is the plan, this is our coach, we are all aligned, this is what we want to do, but it's going to hurt for a minute, would we all be okay with that? I'd like to think the answer is yes, but that's sort of what I'm leaning on right now. Now, Alex, truly, please jump in.
Alex, I'm gonna take it. Sorry again from 1 second. Just I'm gonna throw it to you. But I want to just take. I like what Adam said there, but I think at the end of the day, though, like you said, short-term pain. It's not like a manager is going to come in here and take out some of the star players that are crucial to this team. Look at the star players: Eustaquio, Davies, Kone, David, Larian. Any manager that's coming in here are not dropping those guys. It's like the players from like 11 to 15 that I always find me and Alex complain about. And I just think if a fresh set of eyes can come in, and you don't even have to, I get what you're saying, Adam, but it's not like someone's going to come in here like, all right, Davies, maybe they'll move into left back, which some of us have been asking for. But it's not like he's going to the bench, or it's time to changing of the guard of all these 33-year-olds for new faces. We have a young team. Sorry, Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, I know. I'm just fascinated now. I'm enjoying the back and forth, and it's fascinating. But yeah, I think that's it. That's the biggest thing, is that there's a lack of plan, because again, the way I see it is you have players 1 to 6. They're going nowhere. If you're lucky, Ali Ahmed becomes one of those guys. Luke de Fougerolles becomes one of those guys. Your core grows. But at the end of the day, you have to plan with the idea that 1 to 6 are there. That's your core. That's your, the big 6, you want to call them: Davies, David, Eustaquio, Kone, etc., Buchanan. They're not going anywhere. So my view is that you have to maximize them. So for example, it's the thing I've said back in the day. If you're telling me that for Alphonso Davies to be a better player, and you're picking between, I don't know, like, again, if you're picking between Sean Young, just someone we're familiar with in the CPL, and picking between Mark Anthony Kane, for whatever reason, Sean Young is the player that's going to get the most out of Alphonso Davies, you got to pick Sean Young, because at the end of the day, you got to make choices that will get the most out of your best players. I think a parallel I use is France, because I watch a lot of France. I enjoy. I hate watching Adrien Rabiot in the midfield for them, but for whatever reason, having him in the midfield gets the most out of Kylian Mbappe. Are there 10 better midfielders than Adrien Rabiot in the pool? Probably, but he gets the most out of Kylian Mbappe. Then there's point 2, the fact that Canada remains loyal to the old guard. For what? Because that's what I'll say. I have no problem with the old guard. I have no problem with veterans. I think, again, if the veterans are earning their spot, that's good. That's healthy. That's what you want. My issue, for example, the last 2 windows, you look at the September or October window, Steven Vittoria is struggling right now for Chavez. Like, he can't get into the team regularly. He's had some, tough performances that have allowed a lot of goals. He was in great form last year. He was deserved to start early in the year. His form's struggling now. What message does that send to a Joel Waterman, a Lucas McNaughton, Moise Bombito even is getting regular minutes in MLS, to see a guy like Vittoria struggling? All right, you come in and you start against Japan, one of the best teams in the world. What kind of message does that send to young players? Because look, I have no problems with veterans coming in and winning their spots. Someone like Junior Hoylett, he continues to do good things for the Whitecaps and for Canada. I'm not saying drop Junior Hoylett. Richie Larea, now I'm genuinely wondering if he's a guy who should be starting next year, because he's, over the last 6 months, he's taken a clear step ahead of Alistair Johnson in the race at right back. Yeah. Okay, they're earning their spots, but then what to do with guys like Vittoria? He's struggling at Chavez. Milan Boryan, he's for Slovan Bratislava, they had a bad, I think they lost like 6-1 in Champions League qualifiers, had to barely scrape out Conference League qualifiers. And at the end of the day, the Slovakian league isn't exactly, you could argue that MLS might be better than the Slovakian league, and you've got a whole host of young goalkeepers doing a job. So that's another thing too, that you're being loyal to guys for what? Because again, to use the France example, because they're easy, they're there. Should guys like if Hugo Lloris played the last World Cup? Probably not, but he's still a top goalkeeper. He did a job. He got you to a final. There's other options of other examples of players doing that. For Canada, at this point, we've seen they've hit a ceiling with these guys. They've been regressing with these guys. So then there's that, and then to the last point, you got to bring in these young players now, because also if you have to look at pragmatic, again, like I said, you don't have qualifiers. You don't have 2025 San Pedro Sula, win or go home. So this is the time where, again, someone like Luke de Fougerolles might not be better than some of the options in front of him now, but he will be in 2026. And at a certain point, You got to bite the bullet because you have this unique opportunity where in international football, it's very short-sighted, extremely short-sighted. It's win the next game, win the next tournament, make the next tournament. You know you're at the World Cup in 2026. That's a huge opportunity. That's 4 years of planning that you get that you never get in international football. Use it. Don't waste it. Because we know what these guys are, and they're wasting it when they could be learning so much more. And that's part 3 of this as well. That frustrates me.
And I think that's what makes the coaching hire so interesting, because there's cases to be made. Like, there's a piece of my brain that says, if you believe in a CPL coach or someone who may not have the cachet, let them start now. But the other side of my brain that says you really want to perform, and the program is not really ready for that level of a restart where a coach can learn too. You bring in someone, if the fit is right, the money is right, all of these things, who has no affinity to a single player in the room. Sorry, Alphonso Davies, you are world class. You are playing left back. I do not care that you have been playing more in an attacking position. In my system, in our system, you are going to play at left back, for example. And I'm not just trying to pick on Fonzie. Or in that game, when you're trying to manage against Jamaica, why in God's green earth are you having attacking advanced fullbacks? Just don't concede. Have someone with a clear identity and a message. So I wonder if you bring in someone with next to no attachment and say, this is what I want to do, because, and there's a reality of both of the national team programs, and for a lot of reason, it was out of necessity. The veterans at times had to coach themselves, had to police themselves, and there's an important role for veterans to play. But I think truly, it is my personal belief that there are veterans on both national teams that wield too much power, and they don't necessarily deserve it, or they should not be allowed to have that much power. And I think it's really noticeable with the men's national team. And like, I'm not throwing stones, and I don't want to gossip or start rumor mills. I think it's pretty obvious to see, if you pay attention to the program, who these people are. And I don't necessarily know that that's to a benefit. So when you're bringing in coaches or bringing in staffers who already have that attachment to people, it is really difficult for them to come in. It's like in other sports, especially, or even in the club game, when an assistant coach becomes a head coach, it is really tough for them to become bad cop. It is very, very difficult for them to put their foot down and say, no, this is not how we're doing it anymore, because they know that there is a fallback and there's comfort. I really think this team could use a shakeup and say, I'm not saying it's a lost cause, and I don't want to panic and act like the world is falling. Canada's still a very good team. Alex rightfully mentions the Big Six. Cue up your "we can" and "we will" comments for all the Leaf fans in the chat. But like, there is good things here, but until the CSA, and it's not just on them, but these national teams want to take that next step forward, there are going to be these moments. Like, a good team does not lose to Jamaica when they're up. It's that simple. And it doesn't have to be Jamaica. Pick your team. In any match environment, unless you are playing the world champions, you do not lose. Or at least if you're going to lose, you lose the right way. I think that's the part that hurt so many people yesterday, other than the fact that it was miserable at BMO with the weather. Also, how about we talk about the fact that that game should have been played in Regina at New Mosaic Stadium? Let's do Azteca again. That's what sucks going home. And when you're waiting 45 minutes to get into BMO Field, which is a whole other can of worms, like, you want them to lose well if they're going to lose.
I was about to say, I was going to try to sneak in there and say in the way that they lost, because I agree. I mean, they played 3 pretty decent halves of football, and then that last one was just a capitulation. And I actually played a little experiment in the chat. I don't know if you guys caught it, just saying, would you have felt better if we lost knowing that Dane St. Clair, LDF, Ali Ahmed, those guys were in? Mostly everyone said yes, because, we'd be trying different things. We'd, like, if we lost, we lost, but we know that, we're looking ahead at least at the 2024 Copa America, at the 2026 World Cup. But yeah, I mean, the big question mark is around the head coach.
And sorry, Josh, just before we move off of that, like, just try it. Try it once or twice. And if it's bad, like if the players they bring in to give these young guys, and I'm not saying start 11 guys with single digit caps, but if you go younger and it's a disaster, at least it's a disaster. Like, and again, we don't necessarily have the windows where you can take those chances all the time. Tough. Try it. If it doesn't work, we say, okay, at least we tried.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. I mean, when I tweet out like my predicted starting 11s, because I usually get yelled at. I tweet out what I think is going to happen, and then why is Boryan in there? Why is Azori in there? So now I tweet out too. This is what I would do. Like, this is what I would do in a dream scenario, but this is what's going to happen. And
right.
Alex and I finally, like we're usually the 1 or 2 players off, but we predicted this starting 11 from top to bottom, and it's not that hard to do. It's the same kind of like 13, 14 guys that will be in there, just which ones in which order. So, I mean, I agree, but like what I want to keep on the head coach role because Armin's in the background here. I don't know if he's waiting to come in. Armin, if you wanted to come in and touch on it, but what I know, like you're talking about Alphonso Davies playing at left back, and I think it's interesting that Biello actually talked about him playing his natural position and then goes on to not play him in his natural position. And the game in Jamaica, me and Alex had a good conversation around like Davies looks a little lost. He doesn't really know exactly what he needs to do. I thought he had a good game at BMO, but still there's times where he's not probably at his best. And Adam, I get what you're saying. Like the coach who's going to come in needs to have the balls, I think, to be like, listen, I don't care, like you said, about what happened before. I'm playing you here, and this is what's going to happen. So I'm just curious of what type of profile of coach is it? Like, do you think, just hypothetically, if a CPL coach did get the job, I mean, do you think Bobby would have no problem looking at Alphonso Davies, squaring him up and be like, you're playing left back in my system, whether he plays that system or not? Like where, and any of you guys can take it, and maybe I'll throw it to Armin first. Like where would you want to look? Do you want to look locally, CPL? Do you want to look at overseas, someone who's a journeyman of international football? Like what is a good, I don't have the right answer. I'm just curious to see what you think. So Armin, welcome. And what are your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. So I think the thing that I often think about when it comes to managers is what phase are you in your project? Like if you look at an international team, there's like a 4-year cycle. A World Cup cycle really informs a lot of your decision making, your roster call-ups. Like when we talk about player call-ups or player selection, I think one of the big things that we're looking at is 2026, right? And then, like, we need to give these players opportunities. So I think the same thing happens with managers. And one of the trends I've noticed the most in world football, especially at the club level now, is this cycle of like different managers for different phases. And I think clubs are starting to be even more intentional about it. You look at a club, they're not looking at like one person who can get us from point A to point B, where point B is success and point A is right at the beginning of whatever cycle they're in. They're looking at it as like, how many different managers can we bring in over this like 4-year time span that can accomplish the goals that we need in order for us to become a winner? I think that's where football is evolving to a sense. I think that's why you see so much managerial turnover at places outside of like Pep Guardiola, who I think is like a manager that can pretty much do everything. You'll see teams transition from that guy who can motivate a locker room to like, okay, now we need a system builder. Now we need someone who can like, we have a united locker room because of this guy's work, but this guy is not the guy that's going to get this united like locker room and turn them into like a cohesive attacking system that functions efficiently and ruthlessly. So you need a different guy. So for Canada, my question would be like, where are we in that build? It seems like John Herdman did a really good job at uniting the locker room. And he also did a really good job at implementing some positive systems of play. I don't think that Canada is a finished product when it comes tactically at all, but I definitely think that there's, good ideas and a good, let's say, a backbone, a good structure, a skeleton for what success could look like. And I think where we are right now is we're in a phase where we're going to need someone who can really figure out what is the most effective way to win consistently against teams that are not easy to roll over. I mean, much of John Herdman's success came against teams that Canada is expected to defeat. And a lot of John Herdman's criticism came against teams that we weren't. So whether you want to look at the World Cup, whether you want to look at the Gold Cup, whether you want to look at that Nations League final, those were difficult moments, and you need a different approach to win in those difficult moments. Now, who might that be? I mean, that's a really good question. I mean, you look at serial winners in terms of Canadian soccer, and obviously the name Bobby Smirniotis comes up. But when I look at Bobby, I think to myself, like, Bobby is the perfect coach to build entire structures around like club organizations. Like, I think if you're like a Toronto FC and you have your academy system and all of that needs to be revolutionized, and then you have your first team, and like, to me, that's Bobby Smirniotis' bread and butter, is like building these like overarching systems whereby like a cohesive club environment can come up. So I don't know like what that looks like from a national team perspective. I don't necessarily, I think he would do a decent job. I think as far as Canadian coaches go, he'd be the best option, but I think we need someone outside of all of it. I think like, obviously the name Carlo Ancelotti likes to come up because of that one quote, but
I too like to dream.
Yeah.
At
Well,
the
I
end,
don't know. I mean, here's the other thing. Everyone says no to Carlo Ancelotti because of the money, right? But at the same time, like if I'm Ancelotti, my bank account's probably not hurting over like 2 decades of success. And like if you're hosting a World Cup and you can like, manage the team that's hosting and see this underdog story, maybe it's worth like I'm only going to make a couple million over 3 years as opposed to 5 or 6. So I don't know. I'm not going to put words in Ancelotti's.
Yeah, like that.
Yeah.
There's searches for a reason, and they like when CIS clubs and federations tell you they're turning over every stone, they are. And if it were to fit, then yeah, I think everyone would be happy. Like I love as much as anyone to have opinions on who should coach and who should play, but like at the end of the day, if you're not operating with all of the facts, and like no one ever is, because that's how federations and clubs work, it's just it's speculation, and there's things that make sense, but yeah, like would it be great? Sure. My one thing with Bobby is like, again, two minds, and like using a Bobby archetype. Tommy's absolutely in that conversation because he's similar. There's a piece of me that says he doesn't have the experience, he's not ready. There's another piece of me that says, look at our youth teams right now as well. Like the youth teams are dire right now. So like in theory, if the person you are hiring is going to oversee everything, that makes sense because there is ways to improve that. And I think they have great minds for that. Having said that, because the World Cup is such a big deal, you kind of want someone who can come in and not be afraid to ruffle some feathers. So it's like in my head, if archetypes like them want that challenge to work within a national system, and we all know how different it is. There's a big reason why you're either you're generally an international manager or a club manager, and there's pros and cons to each. Like you can come in and say, hey, well, how are you as an assistant coach? You'll be on the staff, you'll work with the first team, but we really need you to fix the academies.
Yeah.
But do they? Because the club gives them more instant satisfaction, they still get to have their hands on. That's when like they have to be asked and what level of control that they would have. I think you bring someone in personally from Europe or South America and just hand them the reins. If the resume backs up, they had that coherent plan, let them go nuts and try it. And there was a comment earlier in the chat that kind of ties back to what I was saying earlier. I think it was from Nick. If Nick is still in here, where I'm saying like play the kids for a couple of games. No, you don't just give them 1 or 2 games. You can't give them a full year necessarily, but you have a good idea where you are at as a barometer if you give them a couple of windows. And again, you're not starting 11 of these kids. You are adding 3 or 4 of them to the group to round out the 6. Or you're starting them, and if it's a disaster, change them at halftime. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. I think there's this – I used to kind of roll my eyes at starters and finishers. Christine Sinclair should have become a finisher much earlier than she did. She's an example of that. So give the young kids time. Know that there are still people like Junior Hoylett that are impactful to finish matches. Let the veterans come in and shore things up. Just try it is, I guess, the only thing that I'm trying to say. And that's where if you have someone who comes in without that same level of attachment to the current group, you say, this is my plan, you're on board or you're not. Like, it's that simple. The coach gets the power. And, like, you don't want to alienate and ruin the room, but, like, that's the reality of international football. The players have to have a voice. It's so important that they do. Let's also talk about the fact that, like, labor deals still have to get sorted out. Like, I don't want to be going into 2025 still talking about labor deals. Like, coach and labor deal, please, check. Let's all move forward. But that's why I think an outside voice might make the most sense. Like, nothing to do with Canada Soccer or whatever. It's like, here's a resume. I know how to win. I know how to build. We're going to try it. If it doesn't work, then you maybe look to an MLS type of coach who is more familiar.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing that I often think about when it comes to this like idea of, let's say, Bobby Smirniotis is that, I mean, as much as he'd be a great manager for this team, I almost wonder if he'd be a better general secretary. Like, give him the reins to build the entire program from top to bottom, where there's an emphasis on specific patterns of play and youth development and specific ideas around, like, bringing in a very cohesive style of play. And then with your head coach, I think the head coach job for a national team is very much, it's not like a club where, you have your hands on a lot of different pots. Like when it comes to the national team, your head coach's only real job should be, how do I get the senior team to succeed? What pieces do I bring in? Because if you think about it, a manager of a national team isn't the one informing training every single week for these players. They all come in with different clubs and different environments and different things that they're working on. The only real area of influence you have are which players are you calling up, which players are playing, and how are they playing? and then everything that happens around that is sort of out of your hands. So it's this weird kind of mix where I'd almost rather have Bobby as general secretary, because I think he can do better and do more in a position where he can oversee a lot. And then you just bring in a head coach who's singularly focused on, how do I get this team to play well and succeed? That's it.
Yeah, like there's a lot in there that I like. The one differentiator that I think is important in these conversations is, I think, because general secretary is like a term that isn't used very often in like other corporate structures that we're familiar with, I think people can overlook just how much of like nuts and bolts business mind that job is. Like, it's CEO as much as anything. So I agree with you, Armin. I think like you bring in that archetype, to use that term again, as more of a overseeing sporting director, technical director, if you want to do that. The general secretary has to be a business person, so that we don't have another situation where, again, I don't blame Jason DeVos per se, but you would not have a CEO type of person even float the B word around, because that's what people who aren't in the day-to-day going, oh, bankruptcy, they said bankruptcy, they have no money, they're broke. And like, that's now just a thing that this association is dealing with. They're not broke. And I think John Herdman proved that. Now, John Herdman had to do a lot of fundraising, and he's very good at that, and he shouldn't necessarily have had to do that. Canada Soccer is not broke, but when you have missteps like that, the average sporting fan grabs onto it and they run with it. And then the media outside of the hyper-specific soccer audience latches onto these negative stories, and that's a whole other can of worms that we don't need to get into. I think everyone who knows soccer and loves soccer it can sort of have a BS filter, but like, those missteps can't happen. That's why I go like, clear, coherent plan, business person as general secretary / CEO. But there is some value, I think, in finding a technical or sporting director type of person for both. And like, I don't think there's an issue with saying from the men's and women's national team down to the U15s, we want them to play in a certain way, but you need coaches who are able to work with the players, know their strengths, and say, on the day, this is what we're doing, and be a coach.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree with all of that. I think not the bigger question, because I think, you need to get everything in a row, like you said, but let's just say that does happen. You still need to focus a little bit on who is going to be the actual head coach. So I want to raise this question because I think it always gets a good debate. Like, and I like the idea of getting someone like Bobby or Tommy to take over the national team. I think, it's pretty cool to see, but when you're talking about just the national team, everything else aside, let's just say, like, Jenkins, everything you said gets figured out and we're good. Now the final decision is who is going to come in and take over from Biello. Are you guys of the belief that it is better to have someone who is an international coach, someone who coaches international teams and have maybe coached in South America, in Europe, maybe somewhere in CONCACAF, to come in? Because I don't think I can, correct me if I'm wrong, but can you think of someone who coached at the club level and then found that same kind of success over at the national team? You see, like, Luis Enrique has I think, struggled with Spain. Nagelsmann is doing an awful job right now to start off with Germany. What happened? I don't know. I think it's easier said than done to say, oh, Bobby, because I love Bobby, had so much success with Forge. Maybe like his next step should be like Major League Soccer instead of the national team. And then you go out and you find someone who's got experience with national teams in different setups. Alex, we haven't heard from you in a bit. What do you agree? Do you think it's, because I've heard multiple different things saying it doesn't matter. If you're a good coach, you can make it work either way. Do you agree? Would you rather find like an international coach to come in, or are you open to anyone?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. My opinion is, personally, I don't know what the others will say, but again, for me, international club, men's, women's, a good coach is a good coach at the end of the day. For me, I'm more focused on profile, just because sometimes you get so hung up on this manager needs this, needs that, when in reality, you look across a lot of the top jobs and look where a lot of managers come from. The answer is it's a bit of everything, right? Like some good coaches are really experienced. Some good coaches, like Nagelsmann, when he was at Hoffenheim, this was a young guy in his 30s who had never coached before. Or you hear like Will Still over at Stade Reims, right? Like this young guy out of nowhere who does the job. And then you see, guys like Herdman and Hervé Renard can't go from the women's game over to the men's game, or vice versa, from the men's game to the women's game, etc. I think a good coach is a good coach. I don't think you should get too hung up on yes, if there's a good, like maybe if in a case of a tie, you look at things like experience, especially in this case. But for me, I just want the coach that can find the right profile, the right tactical vision for this team, because I think that's hugely important. And then, that's pretty much the most important thing. So like for example, for someone like me, that's why I don't really care if it's a guy coming from the CPL, MLS, Ligue 1, Serie A, because we have to remember a guy like Benito Floro coached at Real Madrid, yet he wasn't really the right, option for Canada. So sometimes I think we get too hung up in all of that when we should be focusing at their resume and what they're actually going to bring tactically. And, for example, someone like, I'll just throw him out because I'm personally a fan of what he could bring. Wilfried Nancy, for example, one thing that really impressed me.
If you could convince him, Alex, yes, that would be my number one choice. Yes.
That's it. Just to his point, for example, one thing that really impressed me as of late, Columbus must win playoff games. They've been a good team all year. They're favored against Atlanta. This guy drops Julian Gressel. And for context, Julian Gressel was a big midseason acquisition that cost a lot of money, and he's a free agent. So essentially, he's also pissing him off and potentially removing the chance of him removing last year. Hard decision, putting in Mo Farsi. They won the tie, right? And Farsi played excellently. He's done it as well at Montreal. For example, that's what I mean profile. I see decisions like that from Anansi. I forget that he's a Columbus coach. I forget his resume, et cetera, et cetera. So if I'm looking at someone from Europe or South America, I want to look more, okay, what can they actually bring versus just name? Because sometimes we can get caught up. Trust me, there's been some bad coaches of Boca Juniors. There's been some bad coaches of Chelsea FC. I would say don't get too caught up.
Ooh.
No, you make a good
Chelsea
point.
fan in me was like, wait, we've had bad coaches? I haven't seen any.
No, Alex, you make a good point. I remember when you brought up Wilfried Nancy, I think a few months ago. I'm like, I gave Alex credit. I tweeted out, I'm like, this would be my number one pick as well. It makes so much sense. The experience he had with Montreal, the connections he has with some of the national team, the way he plays. But I mean, guys, at the end of the day, is it not going to come down to money? There's going to be interest in this job.
People have to be available too, right? Again, I'm not saying that Alex is saying it's got to be Wilfried Nancy, as much as I think it would be fantastic. I'd love to live in that world where he was in charge of the men's national team. Columbus had to pay out Montreal to release him from his contract. Columbus is going to say, you can have him, but it's going to cost you this. And they may not even it's going to come down to money, but that's everything. But that's the other part of this discussion. And again, going back to finances and everything, it's the annoying side of sports that sometimes you don't want to think about the business, but that's a decision. It's and the other thing too is what coach, based on the climate, want it? Who wants to come into a labor negotiation right now?
Brendan Rodgers.
That's part of my thing here is the conditions have to be favorable such that a coach, if you want to use Ancelotti, because that's the one that seems to get traction, the conditions have to be such a way that Ancelotti wants to deal with the BS that goes around with any situation. That's the other thing too. Canada's soccer is one of the loudest. It's not the only association that's struggling with finances and labor disputes and everything. That's the climate. Look at the economy we're in right now. It's the things. You want to just break sports apart and say, this is my sanctuary. This is my thing that I love after a long day at work or a long day with my kids or whatever it is. But it's not. Politics happen. The economy. Everything ties together. It's all this big mixture. So while it's great to pick profiles, coaches have to want this job, and they can't half want it. It's one thing to be I want to coach at a World Cup. John Herdman could have coached the 2026 World Cup for Canada and decided it wasn't for him. And that's not an indictment of the CSA. I think that's actually some decent self-awareness from John Herdman to say, I've seen it. It's not worth it for me. I'm going to do something else. Good. If it's a distraction or it's not worth it for you, leave. And I think he's going to be happier with more control in a club environment. That's why you need the profile of person that wants to deal with it. And they need to be a unifier. They need to bring people together. And maybe if it is someone who has had experience dealing with labor disputes, that could be an asset for players who might have questions, anything, whatever. That's why the fit has to be perfect. And that's part of the reason why, as much as we would all love a decision to be made tomorrow, I don't mind it's taking a little bit longer or will take a little bit longer. It just circles back to my original point. Whoever it is has to come in with a plan.
Yeah, the biggest question is, has it even started?
Yeah.
Well, and it hasn't really in earnest because there's no general secretary. That's the other thing that we need to remember. You're not going to put those that key part in place when the structure is not there to support them. And while that's frustrating, the process is happening. It's going to happen before we know it. But until that is made, that is going to be priority number one. It'd be great if they were done together and the general secretary comes in. This is my person hired. Let's be a little bit realistic. That's kind of the other thing here.
I think for me, the thing that we lost in that conversation just right now was the fact that that manager shouldn't even have to deal with it. The head coach shouldn't even be thinking about these issues. Like these are issues that exist outside of what the realm of his like responsibilities should be at all. And the other thing is, I think the thing that so often gets lost in almost every single discussion around football is like the human aspect of all of this. It's like if you're John Herdman and you invest yourself emotionally and like literally in terms of your time into helping solve some of these backroom issues with Canada Soccer, that is an emotional toll that is being taken on your ability. Like it's part of your capacity is being limited. So if you were to bring in a European manager who's on day one says, I don't care about any of this, you sort it out, I just need my resources, you tell me what I have, this is what I need, and if it doesn't align, you have to figure out how to get me what I need in order for us to succeed. I'm not involving myself with any of this. This is not my problem, this is yours. So if you were like, and the other thing is it's like a matter of like, if you're sitting in that office in Ottawa with the rest of the Canada Soccer employees, there's a very different way that they're willing to talk to somebody that they perceive as just like, you know, a CPL coach versus a Carlo Ancelotti. There's no way they're talking to Bobby Smirniotis the same way that they're talking to Ancelotti, for good or for bad, on both sides of whatever the issue might be. So it also depends on, you know, the relationships that this organization can build with whoever that manager is. Is that manager going to be a leader? Because that's what John Herdman in a way was for Canada Soccer. It's the reason why he was so entrenched in almost all aspects of its dealings, is the reason why he was out there raising funds and helping the organization. It's, you know, to me, that head coach role needs to be, you are the head coach of the team and you need somebody else who's purely running. I think Jason DeVos can do the side of development. He's got a brilliant footballing mind for that
great.
stuff.
That's why they hired him to be the side of development. Like now you can make the argument that the development has been kind of stagnant, but again, looking at the conditions that surround it. But I don't think Jason DeVos is he adds a ton of value. There's a reason for it, but he's not a general secretary, and I don't think he ever pretended he was. It was almost doing a favor to be the stopgap until they could find one. I do want to say shout out all the Jamaicans in the chat. I know that the top left banner here, where is it? Here it says post-game analysis. We're doing this because you guys showed up, grabbed a grenade, threw it into Canada Soccer, and walked off into Copa America. So congratulations, thoroughly deserved. I thought the way you responded was brilliant. So I don't mind you taking your victory lap and having some banter. I think it's well deserved. But this has definitely become more of a Canada Soccer macro conversation than it is. So that was earlier in the video talking about the actual match. But you guys came in and really like took the hornet's nest and shook it.
Yeah, and shout outs to the fact that like Jamaica, along with a bunch of other like CONCACAF nations over the last even 3 years, have completely raised their game. I mean, CONCACAF is becoming a very difficult region. It used to be like, you know, USA, Mexico, and then everybody else. That middle of the pack now is growing. It's the same thing that the women's national team is dealing with, is the idea that like every year spent, other teams are getting better. It's happening in CONCACAF too. So
it used to be difficult for different reasons, more so like, you know, the state of play, the pitch.
But like, let's not forget too, like Jamaica's rise, like since we're kind of on the topic of like federations, Jamaica's done this in spite of their federation too. Like Jamaica's women's national team only exists because of a benefactor, and like Mrs. Marley has saved that program and helped them get to the World Cup. Like they had a GoFundMe for the World Cup. Like nobody, like that's the other thing I think sometimes Canada Soccer forgets. Like this is loud and we're in Canada. Not the only country in the world that has issues with their federation, because it's business and it's politics and it's all these things. But anyways, you're right. Shout out to the Jamaicans for what they've done the past couple of years. And like that Reggae Boyz team was great. And like that wasn't a full strength Reggae Boyz either. Like that's the other thing. Like imagine that team with like everyone fit, like everyone available. Like what would have been a different time.
And also their end of game, sorry, Josh, the end of their game where just like pull out every trick in the book to run the clock was just masterful.
I did love the Mexican referee who like looked over. I can't remember if it was Bailey on the ground, looked over and it's just like, I'm not blowing the whistle.
and you got a good chance from it.
Yeah,
Davies said
it was like 9 men at one point.
2 minutes.
There was an Andre Blake goal kick where I knew it was going to happen. I just had the instinct. I was just like, okay, I'm going to literally count out how long this one takes. It took like 18 seconds for him to get the kick away, and he didn't get yellow carded for it. And I was like, damn. Yeah,
Canada will always count the 6 seconds because of what happened at the Olympics, but also like Boryan is the king of that, and we all know that. So like it doesn't even bother me anymore. It's so inherent in the game. It's like, okay, we're gonna do this. That's fine. Although I was a bit surprised to see 9 minutes of added time.
Yeah. Also,
that was a little Qatari in terms of like how much was tacked on to the end. I was like, this crew could easily put 5 and be like.
I mean, the other thing for me is like Jamaica missed a bunch of really like straightforward chances. Like, to be perfectly honest, Canada survived that first leg on luck, and then the second was, obviously didn't go our way. But I mean,
and like the other thing too from that game, you guys might have touched on it. Joined the stream a little bit late, but like if Laren or any of the attackers score one of those, like. One of Jamaica's goals was exactly what Kyle Laren was denied on by Andre Blake. Like that obviously changes the game. And it's like, yes, Blake was brilliant and deserved all the flowers that he got. But at the same time, like, score. Score.
It was a wild match that way because, like you said, I mean, there was clear-cut opportunities for both sides in the first half. I thought Canada was a better side in the first half. And then on top of that, there's a little controversy around all 3 of Jamaica's goals, like the foul that could have, I'm not saying it should have, but could have been called on Eustachio, on Kone, and of course the handball. Like this tie was open for both. It's just the way, like Jenkins was talking about earlier, the way that this national team had a historic win in Jamaica coming back home, and this has been a fortress lately, and they found a way to have a good first half and have complete control, and then to toss it away the way that they did, it's going to raise a lot of questions. That's exactly what we're doing today, but the biggest one from who I've talked to online and in person is just that it's game management. It's about Biello and some of the decisions were made. That's kind of the big takeaway, as well as Davies. And I think that
and symbiotic too, Josh. Right? Like players, like we forget how high a level a lot of these guys play. Sometimes, no, I shouldn't say we forget, but like we need to be cognizant of they play that level. So yes, the coach needs to be like bunker. Stay back, stop running. But also, you play in top European leagues. You've been playing this game since you could walk. You should be able to read the room and know, like, yes, goals are great. You can add some insurance, but especially when it became to if Jamaica gets another, they're through on away goals. Like, what are you do? Stop. Like, you are smarter than this. Stop. That was the only thing going through my head. Is just like I could not believe. And yes, like Biello and the staff needs to like force them to do it, but also there's some responsibilities on the players here too. Like they are too good to allow bad habits and things in such a big game.
Well, and Alex and I talked
juggling.
The juggling.
And juggling. Yes, 100%.
Jimmy Brennan did not like that.
And that's the one time I wish I was in the. I shouldn't say the one time wish I was in the booth, but like I could feel the look. Like I literally turned and looked up at the press box and was like, he is staring lasers into Garrett's head. I just wanted to say too, with taking care of the moments of the game. I totally lost my train of thought because I'm thinking of Jimmy Brennan staring at me. I'll come back to it. You jump in.
I don't know. As far as the keepy uppies go, I really can't say anything about it because I do it so frequently in FIFA, like online, that like it's like if I say something about this, I'm gonna eat some karma ahead of like
definitely a parallel.
And then someone will score on you and just gritty, right? Because that's the karma cycle of FIFA.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, sorry, I got it. Just the thing about like all 3 of Jamaica's goals being controversial, like sure, yes, and I don't disagree with that, but also like good teams don't let that be the reason they lose or lose in that way. So like it's not a Josh, you're wrong, I disagree. It's both things can be true, and I think we need to be like, yeah, both things are definitely true in this instance. Sure, you could say foul here, VAR should have done this, early like set piece, fine. Good teams, great teams that Canada wants to be and puffs their chest and says that they are because they won the group to qualify for Qatar. Don't let that happen. And like that's the thing that I struggle with sometimes with that group is they demand to be treated a certain way by everybody. And like that's fair. They've earned some respect. But if that's going to be the demand from the team from the locker room, like you've just got to be better. You can't have days off when you want that level of pressure and success.
I agree 100%. Like I said, that's why I kind of meant like the tie itself. But I think a good point of what you just said, and I talked about it, and it was actually something I noticed in the first half was like the amount of freedom that Alistair Johnston, just one example, has to go in the midfield. It was I liked it in the first half when we had control and we took that lead. He was doing it all the time. But then like Alex kind of talked to when we were going through the goals earlier is that after something didn't go our way and they scored that goal, it was time to adjust a little bit. And then the second goal that they scored, Alistair Johnston again was jumping up to the midfield.
Behind the defensive line, by the way.
Yeah.
It did. Like you said, it's on. That's a point where it's on the players. Like the goal, yes, maybe a foul on Kone, but like AJ, why are you that far up? I know that you were doing in the first half. And
it seemed weird how they, and like, admittedly, I'm not generally as involved with the men's national team with OneSoccer as some of the other properties, but like, it seemed like it was very experimental with like Kone dropping in to cover it right back. And I'm like again, like that we're trying things, but at halftime, stop that. Like that's just ultimately it. Like, it's a game of two halves. You did a lot of good things, but just because it worked in the first half doesn't mean you need to continue to try and build on it in the second when you are then 45 minutes away from Copa America Nations League finals.
Yeah, and that's something that's on the players. And like another point, that's in the defensive side. But then when you needed a goal, again, like I thought it was wild how no one really wanted the responsibility. Maybe it was the players that were on the pitch, but it was so choreographed. It's like, hey, is the ball on the right hand side where it can be swung in? Let's get it over to Davies somehow. Let's just get it to him so he can do a little shimmy, put it on his left foot, and then it can be defended. There was just no identity and no ideas towards the end of the match when they were chasing and they just looked panicked. And like there's a good, I don't know if you guys noticed it, there's a good camera work that went on Biello, and he just like a deer in headlights, like just did not know what he wanted to do. And
and to his credit, just hearing some of the things he was trying to coach the players up, like I'm not saying they were ignoring him, but there were definitely times where he was like trying to coach as much as he could in the moment with his words instead of like an actual definitive tactic that like they just weren't listening at times. Like I really think, and we saw it in Qatar when backs are against the wall, need a goal. We saw it in different finals this summer. Like players can get individual, and it's almost like they haven't been battle tested enough, although they're starting to get into that category where it's just like, I know Alphonso Davies is good. And Alphonso Davies goes, I know I'm one of the best in my position in the world. Like it's me. And they put that pressure on themselves, and then it just becomes predictable. And then you get Liam Miller drifting in to play through the middle when he and Davies are basically doing the same thing. And it's just like, all of it just kind of goes out the window, and it's kind of crazy, which we should try to avoid the crazy.
Yeah, guys. Well, Alex texted me last night, so this stream's going to be a spicy one. We usually do about an hour stream. We're an hour and 41 minutes.
100 minutes, baby.
Came in here and fired up.
Whole game.
Yeah,
we had time to take a lead and then let it all slip away.
That's what happened when you brought me into the game. More questionable substitutions. Armin texted me at 12:48 and said, "You want to jump in for 10 minutes?" That was an hour ago.
Yeah, I saw you in the chat.
Yes.
I was like, well, why are you wasting time on the chat if you're just hanging out?
To be fair, I was doing laundry, and I was just like, that's a good point.
I could jump in. All right, guys. Well, then to end off this stream, let's, I told Alex this, for the women's game and the men's game lately, I feel like we've come on here, we've done nothing but bitch. We did it. We did it again. So I guess
really good at it, to be fair.
Yeah, really good. So let's try to end off with one positive note. Each of us will start with Alex. One positive note, looking ahead to the Trinidad and Tobago match. What is it? What can make these fans leaving this stream today and not going into their pillow and yelling? What's one positive thing that you can show from this window leading up to the Trinidad and Tobago match?
That you still have a chance to make Copa America. And at the end of the day, that's hugely important. And if anything, this Jamaica game has a chance to be a wake-up call. Like, it's not something where you're sitting here and it's over, it's done, it's finished. It's, like the sky hasn't fallen down yet. Then if they lose to TNT, okay, that's a problem. But they can at least head into TNT and use this Jamaican game as a learning opportunity.
Armin?
I guess if we're talking silver linings, the one that I would take out of it is that, that first half showed me that we can still be, a top team in this region, that there is a lot to be, it's not as dire, I think, as the situation might feel. This is a good team on their day. And if they can figure out how to do that over 90 minutes consistently, again, like they did during World Cup qualifying, like they have in moments, then, this is not a team that isn't far from the throne. So it's just a matter of when you get knocked down, you got to get back up. And I think we have the personnel to do it. I think we have the talent coming up that can supplement the ones that are leaving. It's just a matter of, dust yourself off, get up and work, because on our day, we are a top team in this region. It's just, how do we get there?
Adam?
Well, since Alex took both,
yeah,
he took two.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was mine.
It was one thing. Right. One thing for Canadian soccer supporters to look forward to. What we all know is going to happen is that Stephen Hart is going to somehow be on the bench, and Andre Rampersad is going to score the goal that eliminates Canada from the Copa America. That is what I am most looking forward to. On Alex's point, what I wanted to actually say lessons are important. It sucks when you have to have them a lot, but like for the players to go out and speak to the press the way that they did, Milan, Eustáquio, everything, like lessons are only valuable if you want to learn from them. I am hella proud, like a lot of Canadians are, of this program, of both of our programs, quite frankly, the last little while. The World Cup, like that was the lesson for the women's national team. They got a little bit comfortable. They were trying to stretch out something way too thin, and it finally collapsed on them. I don't think this is that for the Canadian men's national team, because they are more than good enough. They are more than talented enough to go and beat Trinidad and Tobago, but they need to take a long look in the mirror. They really do. Like I love confident athletes, especially when they are wearing your country's colors, and also shout out Canada for wearing the red kits at long last. I was ready to tweet a picture of the Canada Soccer Association logo, all black, and the Canadian flag black. We're red. Maybe it's cursed now. We'll never see it again. The lessons are only valuable if they want to take them, and if they're going to strut through BMO Field with the boombox blaring and their Louis Vuitton bags and like put on this swagger that they have, like that's fine, good. I want you to feel confident, look good, feel good, play good, but they need to be able to say when things go wrong, how was I responsible for this going wrong? Not blame themselves, but what did I do that could be better? And that needs to be top to bottom, and they need to come back stronger. Pick your cliches from there, because the brotherhood and all these messages of unity and all these things are great if it's true, and we need to see it be true. I want them to stick together, but also not think that they're infallible.
Yeah.
You guys didn't leave me with much, but I guess just looking ahead, I mean, this is a one-off match, man. If this national team misses out on the Copa America, that would be a very, very dark day. This is such an exciting tournament. I remember watching the 2016 edition. This is a big, big moment for this national team to see how they shape up against some of the best in common ball. I'm really, really excited for it. And if they crash out the way they did against Jamaica, and then they play Trinidad and Tobago, and they lose again in that one-off game, that kills me. So I would like to think, looking at the way that some of these players, and like you said, like they came out to talk to the press, I'm looking forward to the response. It'll be a long time. Maybe we get that January camp, and there's a nice MLS camp, which I would love. But I want to look at Eustáquio, a player who's been so incredible for this national team. Everyone always sings his praise, says how he's the most important player of this team. He's going to look in this mirror, and there's no way he's going to be like, I was directly responsible, rightfully or wrongfully, I was directly responsible for 2 goals. They stripped me back in the net. I had unfortunately, the penalty. It is what it is. I want to see how he reacts to it. Alphonso Davies, I thought he had a good game. But regardless, this is a player that kind of match kills Alphonso. You know how much he loves to play for this national team. He wanted it. He took the responsibility at the end of the match. Didn't go his way. I want to see the way that these guys, like you guys kind of said as well, will look in the mirror. But I want to see the response. I want to see this game's a long time coming. And now we have to sit and ponder until March to figure out whether we're playing in one of the most exciting tournaments that this national team has played for in a while. And it's going to drive me crazy. It could have been done with. We could have been chilling here and looking forward to hopefully competing for a trophy.
Bro, my thumbnail, my graphics, all of it, I had to scrap it. I had the nice qualified graphics. I had to quickly pivot it to like a sad Alphonso Davies face.
Instead of qualified, it's just depressed.
Yeah.
It's depressed. It is. It's a long time coming. This is March.
On that, Josh, here's my, I'm taking my media hat off and putting my Canadian soccer supporter hat on, which I don't do that often. I just want to give Stefan Eustáquio a hug. I don't want him to, I know I just said I want everyone to look in the mirror and be like, what did you do wrong? Not Steph. Everyone but Eustáquio, because he is so rarely has an off day.
Yeah.
And again, that's when you go back to handball controversy, all these things. It sucks for him, but of all of the players on the field, I want him to do that the least, because he's been good and I want him to stay as confident as ever. There's others that I want to look in the mirror and be like, oh God, I need a haircut in a proverbial sense. But not Eustáquio.
I feel like Eustáquio at this point is like a blessing. This is a guy who would probably be getting called up to Portugal right now.
I don't know if I'm ready to go there, but yes, he's been phenomenal.
I mean, he's one of FC Porto's best midfielders consistently. He's scoring.
He would be in camps, I think.
Yeah,
yes.
he'd be getting called up. I'm not saying he'd be starting every game, but he'd be in that picture, and he's not with them. He's with us. And I guess if I had to give one final message for my, once a year appearance on OneSoccer's YouTube channel is, if you're watching this and you're a young footballer in Canada, you're Canadian, you have dreams of being pro, please just tell your coach you're playing defensive midfielder, and just watch as much tape as you can on Makalele and Xabi Alonso and N'Golo Kante, and like we need a defensive midfielder. Just please, if you can.
Center backs rule.
Yeah, like I say,
kids.
center backs another
Center
decent
back,
option.
defensive
Eat
midfielder,
your
whatever. Like,
vegetables
give-
and drink your milk and
Yeah.
grow big and strong, and please, for the love of all that is holy,
and
save
because-
this program.
love
because
a
our-
tackle. Just follow.
Be good in the air, make good decisions, and maybe be able to run a 40 in like 5.5 and like done.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Ball playing wouldn't hurt either.
No.
But
Yes.
okay, Alex, let's not be greedy, okay? We
Yeah,
want
just
we
say-
put realistic targets for our young.
Yes.
Yeah, just grab a ball, go. What does Berbatov always say? Go with the brick wall and just bounce the ball back and forth. Work on your left foot, right foot, and then you'll have no problems.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
if you're
exactly.
5'8" like I am, maybe a little higher up the pitch. It's fine.
Yeah.
Why do you
Well-
think I grow my hair this tall, bro? I'm 5'6" on a good day. Come on now.
Full back Adam Jenkins. That's good. All right, guys. Well, that is it. Almost a
They don't
2-hour
call me
stream.
Jenks Tachio for nothing
Jenks
there,
Tachio.
Demi.
Yeah, nice. Technically gifted midfielder there. But all right, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this stream. Everyone who tuned in for it. I know it's a frustrating one, unless you're some of the Jamaicans that were in here having a heyday. But I really appreciate it. These streams are always fun to do. And now we'll have to sit and ponder and wait to see if we'll qualify for the Copa America until March. So, guys, on your way out, drop a like, drop a sub, and it was a pleasure. Cheers, friends.